Eli had always lived a quiet life. He worked alone at a research station on the edge of human space, far from the busy cities and crowded ships that made up most of human civilization. The station was isolated, surrounded by a vast, empty expanse of stars and unknown worlds. His job was simple: to study alien species that passed by the area, sending back information to Earth about the far-off creatures and strange life forms. He never imagined that his life would change with a single crash landing. It was a typical night. Eli was at his desk, working on the latest data he had collected, when the alarm suddenly blared. Cutting through the silence, the station's emergency lights flickered on, bathing the walls in a harsh red glow. Ellie's heart skipped a beat. He jumped up from his chair and rushed to the control panel. A ship, no. A pod was falling from the sky, headed straight toward the station. It wasn't supposed to be there. There were no scheduled ships, no known traffic. His fingers flew over the keyboard, trying to get a lock on the pod's trajectory. But it was already too late. The pod crashed into the station with a deafening noise, throwing Eli back against the wall. He stumbled to his feet, his head spinning, his breath shallow. What had just happened? A few seconds of disorientation later, he pushed through the door and ran to the docking bay. As he arrived, the scene before him was nothing like he expected. The pod, which had once been sleek and advanced, was now nothing more than a twisted metal shell. The air was thick with the smell of burnt fuel and charred debris. Eli cautiously approached the wreckage, the hairs on his neck standing on end. The strange silence that followed the crash was unsettling. Something was off. Then he saw her. At first, Eli thought she was just a shadow, but as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw her lying near the wreckage, covered in dirt and blood. Her breathing shallow but steady. She was unlike anything he had ever seen before. She was an alien doll, with skin that shimmered faintly, like the surface of a distant star. Her features were sharp and graceful, her long hair dark against the pale glow of her skin. But what struck Eli most was the faint, glowing symbols on her skin, marking her like some kind of living map. He knelt beside her, feeling a surge of urgency. "Hey, are you okay?" he whispered, his voice trembling slightly as he reached out to touch her. Armed out at first, she didn't move, but then her eyes fluttered open. They were a brilliant shade of blue, unlike anything he had ever seen. They stared up at him, filled with confusion and fear. Her lips parted as if to speak, but no words came out. She struggled to sit up, her breathing quick and labored. Eli immediately placed a hand on her shoulder, trying to steady her. "Stay still," he said gently. "You're hurt. Let me help you." She looked at him, her eyes narrowing slightly, as if trying to understand. Then, in a voice that sounded both soft and strong, she spoke. I need you." Eli froze, unsure of what she meant. "What do you mean?" he asked, though a part of him already knew that this was no ordinary encounter. She weakly lifted a hand, pointing toward the wreckage of her pod. They're after me," she murmured. "Please, I need you to survive. I can't do this alone." The words were strange, but there was something in her voice, a deep, desperate need that tugged at Ellie's heart. He didn't know who she was, or where she came from, but the urgency in her tone left no room for hesitation. Eli helped her to her feet, his mind racing. He had no idea what he was supposed to do or how to help her. She was an alien, and yet, for some reason, she seemed to trust him. Her body trembled as she stood, barely able to keep herself upright. But her eyes, the same eyes that had looked at him with such fear, were now filled with something else. Hope that Eli could do something to save her. "Let's get you to the med bay," Eli said, lifting her into his arms. "I'll help you. Just stay with me." As they moved toward the medical area of the station, Ellie's mind began to fill with questions. Who was she? What did she mean by needing him to survive? And why did she crash here? Of all places, these were questions for later, though, for now, Eli focused on getting her the help she needed. The alien princess, he realized, was depending on him physically, emotionally, and perhaps in ways he couldn't yet understand. Her life, and maybe his own, were intertwined now. The quiet life he once knew was over. The galaxy, and whatever dangers it held, had just found its way to him, and Eli had no choice but to face whatever came next. The medbay was dimly lit, with various medical devices scattered around the sterile room. Eli carefully laid the alien princess, Lyra, down on the examination table. He watched her closely, her breath still shallow, but her eyes were now more alert. As he worked to check her vitals, his mind raced with questions. He had never seen anything like her before. Her skin, her glowing markings, the way she seemed so fragile yet so powerful. Eli ran a scanner over her body, and the machine beeped steadily, analyzing her condition. There were cuts and bruises all over her, but nothing too serious. The real problem was her energy levels. She was weak, far weaker than she should have been. He didn't know what had caused this, but he could see that she was far from ordinary. "Why are you so weak?" Eli muttered to himself, leaning in closer to examine her markings. They seemed to pulse softly in rhythm with her heartbeat. Something about her, something he couldn't quite understand, made him feel as though her survival depended on something more than just basic medical care. Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. I need you." Eli turned quickly, startled by her words. "What do you mean?" he asked, trying to remain calm. The urgency in her tone made him uneasy. Lyra's eyes, though still distant, focused on him. "I need your energy to survive," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "My people, we can only live if we share energy with others. A human's energy is the only thing that can keep me alive." Eli blinked, trying to understand what she was saying. Energy? Like a power source? Lyra nodded weakly. Her breathing labored. "Yes, my kind, we cannot survive without it. We are born with a natural bond to humans. When we share this bond, it keeps us alive." She closed her eyes for a moment, as if the effort of speaking was too much. "Without you, I will die." The weight of her words settled in Ellie's chest like a heavy stone. He had read about alien species before, but nothing in his studies had ever prepared him for something like this. An alien race that relied on humans for survival. It sounded impossible. "But I don't understand," Eli said, his voice shaky. "How does this energy sharing work? What do I need to do?" Lyra opened her eyes again, this time with more focus. She was struggling, but there was a calmness in her gaze. "It's not just physical. It's emotional too. The connection between us must be strong, constant. Your energy, your feelings, your presence, it keeps us alive." Eli stepped back, his mind swirling. He felt trapped, caught between a strange new reality and the life he thought he knew. How could he possibly help her in this way? He wasn't equipped for something like this. He was just a researcher, a man alone on a quiet station. "But I don't," he started, but Lyra cut him off. "You must," she said, her voice growing weaker. "If you don't, I won't survive. Please, I don't have much time." The fear in her voice struck him deeply. He could see the truth in her eyes, the desperation that filled them. Eli felt a strange pull inside him, a deep sense of duty to help her. She was alone, just like him, but her survival was now in his hands. His thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of everything she had said. He moved closer to her, unsure of what to do, but knowing he couldn't just walk away. He had to help her. There was no other choice. Eli sat beside her on the edge of the examination table. He hesitated for a moment, then gently reached out, his hand brushing against hers. Lyra's skin felt warm, almost like it was glowing beneath his touch. For a moment, nothing happened, but then a strange feeling washed over him, like a current of energy flowing through his fingers and into her. He pulled his hand back quickly. Startled, Lyra let out a soft sigh, as if some weight had been lifted from her. "That was enough," she whispered, her eyes closing in relief. "You gave me just enough." Eli sat there, confused and still shaken by the experience. What had just happened? He could feel a strange tingling sensation in his hand, like he had just touched something electric. But there was no time to dwell on it. Lyra needed more than that. She needed more of him. "I can't," Eli said, shaking his head. I don't know how to do this. How can I give you energy? Lyra's eyes opened once more, softer now, filled with understanding. It's not just about giving. It's about being connected. You don't have to understand it all at once. Just be here with me. Your presence will keep me strong. Eli felt the weight of her words. She was asking for something that seemed impossible, something beyond his understanding. But there was something in her voice that made him want to try. He couldn't leave her to die. Not when he could do something about it. Okay, he said quietly, sitting down beside her. I'll stay. For the first time since she had arrived, Lyra's face softened, and a faint smile appeared on her lips. It was a smile full of gratitude, full of something that Eli couldn't quite name. He wasn't sure if he could help her, but he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't leave her alone in this. The hours passed in silence, and Eli stayed by her side. Every so often, he will. Do you feel that strange connection again? The flow of energy that he still didn't fully understand. Lyra's condition seemed to improve, her breathing becoming steadier, her skin less pale. By the time the sun set on the distant horizon of the planet below, Eli knew that whatever lay ahead, he had just taken the first step into a world he never imagined. A world where survival was no longer just about living, it was about sharing, about connecting, about surviving together. And Eli had no choice but to accept that he had a part to play in keeping Lyra alive. No matter how strange or difficult it might be, days passed, and Eli found himself adjusting to a new kind of life. The research station, which had once felt like a quiet place of solitude, now seemed full of life. Lyra was becoming a constant presence in his world, and while the situation was strange, Eli couldn't deny the connection that was growing between them. Each night, after the workday ended, Eli would return to the medbay where Lyra rested. He'd sit beside her, unsure of what else to do but be there. It wasn't just about the energy sharing anymore, it was something deeper. The bond between them was forming in ways he never expected. At first, he had thought that helping her survive was a burden, something he was reluctantly pulled into. But now, it was beginning to feel like a duty, one that he couldn't easily turn away from. Lyra had started talking more, sharing stories about her homeworld, a planet filled with lush forests and strange, glowing rivers. She told him about her people, how they lived in harmony with nature and had learned to harness the energy of the universe itself. It was a beautiful world, one Eli could only imagine. But the more she spoke, the more he realized how much danger she was truly in. They're hunting me, Lyra had said one night, her voice heavy with fear. The enemy, they want to use me, my energy. They'll stop at nothing to take it. Eli frowned, anger rising in his chest. Who would do such a thing? Who would hunt someone just for their energy? It seemed wrong and natural. He hadn't asked for any of this, but now he couldn't simply stand by and let her be captured again. What kind of enemies are you talking about? He asked, his voice calm but filled with concern. They're a powerful faction, she explained. They've been trying to capture my kind for years. My people have been hunted for generations. We're seen as nothing but tools to be used for energy, and now they've found me. Eli clenched his fists, trying to understand the weight of her words. He could feel her fear, her desperation. She needed him, not just for survival, but for protection as well. The realization hit him hard. He couldn't just be a passive observer anymore. He had to act. The next day, Eli began planning. He went through the station's armory and pulled out anything that could help defend them. He wasn't a soldier, but he had basic combat training. It wasn't much, but it was something. He needed to keep Lyra safe, and that meant preparing for a fight. Lyra watched him as he worked, her eyes tracking every movement. You don't have to do this, she said softly. I don't want to put you in danger. Eli stopped what he was doing and turned to her. You're not putting me in danger. I'm doing this because I want to. I'm not going to let anyone take you. There was a moment of silence, a quiet understanding passing between them. Lyra didn't say anything more, but her expression softened. It was the first time she looked at him like she truly trusted him, like she believed in his words. As the days went by, Eli worked tirelessly to fortify the station. He knew it was only a matter of time before Lyra's enemies would come for her, and he was determined to be ready. But even as he worked, a part of him couldn't shake the feeling that he was in over his head. This wasn't his fight, and he wasn't prepared for what was coming, but he couldn't back down. Not now. That evening, as the sun set behind the station, Eli sat beside Lyra once again. She was looking out the window, her glowing markings softly illuminating the room. She looked fragile, but there was strength in her eyes. Eli knew she was a fighter, just like him. "I've been thinking," Eli said, breaking the silence. "We can't keep running forever. Sooner or later, they'll catch up with us. We need to go on the offensive." Lyra turned to him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Eli said, his voice steady, "we need to strike first. We need to make sure they know we're not just sitting ducks. If we can hit them hard enough, they might think twice about coming after you again." She looked at him for a long moment, studying him as if weighing his words. Finally, she nodded. "You're right," she said quietly. "But I don't know how we can do this. I don't have the power to fight them alone." Eli smiled, a plan beginning to form. In his mind, "You won't have to do it alone. I'll be with you every step of the way. We're in this together." The words felt true. He wasn't just doing this because it was the right thing to do. He was doing it because he wanted to. He wanted to protect her, to help her survive. There was something about Lyra that made him feel like he wasn't just going through the motions of survival. He was fighting for something greater. Maybe it was love, or maybe it was just the bond they had formed. But whatever it was enough to drive him to act. And as they prepared for the battle ahead, Eli knew one thing for sure. He wasn't just helping her survive anymore. He was fighting for both of them, and together, they would face whatever dangers the galaxy had in store. The days of preparation had passed in a blur of activity, and now, Eli found himself standing at the station's control center, watching the sky through the large observation window. The stars outside looked calm, almost peaceful. But Eli knew better. The calm before a storm was always the most dangerous time. Lyra was resting in the medbay, her energy levels slowly improving thanks to the bond they had formed. She wasn't fully healed, but she was stronger, and Eli could see the determination in her eyes. She wasn't going to let the enemy win. Neither of them would. Eli took a deep breath and began going over the plan in his head again. He wasn't a military strategist, but the research station had basic defensive capabilities: blasters, shields, and a handful of old starfighters. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. They couldn't afford to wait for the enemy to arrive on their terms. They needed to make the first move. "Eli, I'm ready." Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned to see her standing in the doorway of the control room, her posture straight, her expression serious, her glowing markings pulsed faintly, a sign of the energy that still flowed between them. "You're sure?" Eli asked, though he already knew the answer. She had been preparing for this moment as much as he had. "I have to be," Lyra replied quietly. "If we don't act now, we may not have another chance." Eli nodded, feeling a weight in his chest. He had grown to care for her deeply, and the idea of her being captured or worse filled him with dread. But this was their fight, and he wouldn't run from it, not anymore. The enemy wasn't just any group of pirates or raiders. They were part of a galactic faction and empire known for its ruthlessness and their desire to control the galaxy's most valuable resources, including alien energy like the one Lyra possessed. They would stop at nothing to capture her, and Eli knew that meant they were coming for her. They had to strike before they did. "Let's do it," Eli said, his voice firm. He activated the control panel and began inputting the launch codes for the station's defensive systems. Lyra walked over to him, her steps slow but purposeful. "We won't be able to hide forever," she said. "The longer we stay, the more they'll track us." Eli glanced at her, feeling a surge of admiration for her calmness in the face of danger. She had been through so much, yet she remained steady, focused. He could learn a lot from her. "We're not hiding," Eli said, His eyes locked onto the screen as the station's weapon systems powered up. "We're going to make sure they know we're not an easy target." With the flick of a switch, the station shields activated, and the blasters powered up. Eli felt a wave of relief wash over him as the systems came online. They were ready, but he knew that the true test was still ahead. "They'll come at us fast," Eli muttered, mostly to himself, "and they'll come in force, I know." Lyra replied, "But we've already beaten the odds once. We can do it again." Eli turned to face her, feeling a quiet strength in her words. He wasn't sure if he fully believed it yet, but hearing her say it made him believe they had a chance. They had to. He glanced at the radar, and his eyes widened. The enemy fleet had arrived faster than expected. Dozens of ships were heading toward them, their massive forms taking up space on the screen. Ellie's heart raced. This was it. "We have to move quickly," Eli said, already moving toward the station's fighter bay. He grabbed a helmet and put it on, the cool metal settling over his head. Lyra followed him, her presence a steady force by his side as they entered the hangar. Eli saw the small starfighters lined up, ready for action. He climbed into the cockpit of one, his hands moving with practiced speed as he activated the controls. Lyra climbed into a second fighter, her skills with the ship's systems impressive for someone who wasn't a trained pilot. She had learned quickly, adapting to her new surroundings with surprising ease. Once they were both strapped in and the engines were running, Eli sent a final message to the station's defense systems, ordering them to engage the enemy ships. The first wave of blaster fire erupted, lighting up the darkness of space as the two sides collided. Ellie's heart pounded in his chest as he guided his fighter toward the approaching enemy ships. His hands gripped the controls tightly, sweat forming on his brow. This wasn't like the research work he was used to. This was real. The stakes had never been higher. Lyra's voice came through the comm system, her tone focused and calm. "Stay close to me. We have to protect the station." Eli nodded, though she couldn't see him. "Got it," he said, and they moved together, weaving through the chaos of space as the battle began. The enemy fleet was formidable. Eli could see their massive warships firing relentlessly, their weapons bright against the blackness of space. But the station's defense systems were holding up well, its shields absorbing most of the incoming fire. Eli and Lyra took turns, engaging the enemy fighters, their small starfighters darting through the battlefield with precision. Ellie's heart raced with each dodge, each turn, each shot fired. His hands were steady on the controls, but his mind was focused on one thing: keeping Lyra safe. She was depending on him. They were in this together. In the midst of the chaos, Eli saw one of the enemy ships breaking off from the formation, heading straight toward the station. Without thinking, he veered off, his fighter shooting forward with all the speed it could muster. "Eli, what are you doing?" Lyra's voice crackled over the comms. "I'm taking out that ship before it gets too close," he said, gritting his teeth. He fired his weapons, hitting the enemy ship with precision. The blast tore through its shields, and with one final strike, the ship exploded into space debris. "Nice shot," Lyra's voice came through, sounding more relaxed. Ellie's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and excitement. They weren't out of danger yet, but they had made a dent in the enemy's forces. And as long as they fought together, Eli felt a glimmer of hope. The battle raged on, but Eli knew that no matter what happened, they weren't going down without a fight. They would face whatever challenges came their way, side by side, until the very end. The battle had been brutal. Eli sat in the cockpit of his fighter, breathing heavily, his hands still gripping the controls. His heart was racing, his adrenaline pumping. It had been hours since the fight began, and while they had managed to push the enemy back, Eli knew they couldn't keep this up forever. The enemy had more ships, more firepower. They would come again. He glanced over at Lyra's fighter, flying smoothly through the chaos, her every move calculated. Despite the danger, there was a calmness to her. She was a warrior in her own right, even though she wasn't built for battle the way humans were. Eli had seen that calm before. Back when she had shared her people's story, she wasn't just trying to survive. She was fighting for something greater than herself, and now they were fighting together. his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden alarm on his console. A new enemy ship had entered the area, larger and more powerful than anything they had faced so far. Ellie's heart sank. This was no ordinary ship. This was their flagship, and it was headed straight for the station. Eli, they've brought in the heavy artillery. Lyra's voice came through his calm but urgent. We need to stop it before it reaches the station. Eli didn't hesitate. He set the course for the enemy ship, his fighter darting through the void. Lyra followed closely behind, her own ship weaving expertly through the debris from the destroyed enemy ships. They were in sync, moving as one dot as they neared the flagship. Eli could see its weapons powering up. The massive ship was ready to fire, and if it hit the station, there would be nothing left to protect. Ellie's mind raced as he tried to come up with a plan. He knew they couldn't take it head-on, not with their small starfighters. But there was one chance, one way to stop it. Lyra, I need you to give me cover, he said, his voice steady, despite the rising tension. I'm going for a direct hit. I'll need you to keep their guns off me. Lyra didn't respond immediately, but Eli could feel the connection between them. She knew what he meant, and without a word, she fell into position. Drawing the attention of the enemy ships away from him, Ellie's hands moved quickly, his fighter diving toward the flagship. His target was a weak point in its hull, a spot where the shields were weakest. It was a risky move, one that would either destroy the ship or get him killed. But there was no other option. As he neared the flagship, enemy fire rained down around him. He could feel the heat of it as his shields absorbed the blasts. His heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts only on the mission ahead. He had one shot at this. Ellie's fighter streaked toward the ship's hull, and just as the flagship's guns began to charge, he pulled the trigger. The blast from his weapons hit the weak point, sending a shockwave through the ship's exterior. The flagship trembled, its shields flickering as the energy from the explosion spread across its surface. For a moment, it seemed like nothing had happened. Then, a massive explosion erupted from within the ship. The flagship's hull cracked, and the ship began to break apart. Its pieces scattered into the dark void of space. Eli breathed a sigh of relief. It was over. The enemy flagship was destroyed. But the battle wasn't done yet. We did it. Lyra's voice came through his calm, and there was something different in her tone of softness, almost like gratitude. You did it. Eli looked over at her, his fighter steady in the chaos of the battlefield. We did it, he corrected, his smile small but genuine. I couldn't have done it without you. Lyra didn't respond, but Eli could feel the connection between them, stronger than ever. She had given him the strength to do what was necessary, and he had protected her. It was a partnership now, not just out of survival, but because they trusted each other. As they moved away from the wreckage of the flagship, Eli noticed the enemy ships retreating. They had suffered a significant blow, and it seemed they had no intention of sticking around. The battlefield slowly began to clear as the last of the enemy ships turned and fled, leaving nothing but debris and silence in their wake. Ellie's mind was still racing, his heart still pounding in his chest. It had all happened so fast, but as the silence of space settled in, he finally allowed himself to take a breath. They had won for now. We need to return to the station, Eli said, his voice quiet but firm. Make sure it's still intact. Lyra nodded, and together, they turned their ships back toward the research station. It was a long journey, and Eli couldn't help but feel the weight of everything that had happened. They had been through so much together already, and yet he knew the real fight was still ahead. The enemy would regroup, and they would come again. But for now, they had a victory. As they docked at the station, Eli felt an overwhelming sense of relief. They had made it through the battle. They had survived. And though the future was uncertain, one thing was clear: he wasn't going to let anyone take Lyra from him. Not after everything they had been through together. He stood in the cockpit of his fighter, staring out at the stars, a quiet promise forming in his heart. No matter what came next, he would protect her, and together they would face whatever challenges the galaxy had in store. The quiet after the battle was almost unsettling. Eli sat in the control room, his fingers still twitching as if he were expecting another attack. The station, though mostly intact, was still damaged. its outer hull pockmarked by enemy fire. The threat had been pushed back for now, but Eli knew that this temporary peace was fragile. He turned his thoughts back to Lyra. She had been resting. For hours, her energy drained from the battle and the bond between them that had kept her alive. He had seen her struggle during the fight, but there was still something powerful about her. Her resilience amazed him, and it was more than just her physical strength, it was her will to survive. Her determination to protect herself and those she cared about. He couldn't help but feel a deep respect for her. Ellie's thoughts were interrupted by a soft voice over the comm system. Eli, we need to talk. It was Lyra. Eli stood up, the weight of her words heavy on his chest. He knew this conversation wasn't going to be easy. Something about her tone told him that. He quickly made his way to the med bay, where Lyra had been recovering. As he entered, he saw her sitting on the edge of the examination table, her glowing markings faintly pulsing against her skin. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. What's going on? Eli asked, his voice gentle but filled with concern. Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes closing for a moment as if she were collecting her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was a sadness to it that Eli hadn't heard before. There's something I haven't told you, she began, her eyes meeting his. Something about my people, about me. Eli felt his heart rate pick up, his mind already racing with questions. He had sensed there was more to her story than she had let on, but he hadn't pushed her. He had known that she would share it when she was ready, and now, it seemed, she was ready. I'm listening, Eli said. Sitting down beside her, Lyra nodded, her gaze shifting as if she were searching for the right words. My people. We aren't just survivors. We were created for a purpose a long time ago. An ancient race discovered our ability to connect with humans, to draw energy from them. It made us incredibly powerful, but it also made us a target for centuries. We've been hunted, used, and controlled by those who want to exploit our abilities. Eli frowned, his mind struggling to understand what she was saying. You mean your race was experimented on? Lyra nodded, her expression darkening. Yes, the race that discovered our connection with humans sought to harness it for their own power. They used my people as tools, and when they were done with us, they discarded us. But even after all these years, the need for our energy still exists. That's why the enemies we just fought are after me. They want to control us again. Eli sat in stunned silence. The realization of what she had just shared hit him like a wave, and he felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Lyra's people had been exploited for their abilities, treated as nothing more than a resource. He couldn't imagine the pain that must have caused her and her race. It was hard to fathom that something so cruel could happen to a people just because of their connection to humans. You're telling me that your race has been hunted for centuries. Because of this? Eli asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lyra's gaze fell to the floor. Yes, and that's why I'm here. I was part of an escape attempt, but they found me. I didn't have a choice. I ran, and I crashed here. And now, because of me, you're involved. You're part of this too. Ellie's heart ached as he looked at her. She had been running for so long, and now the fight had come to him. But he also understood something else. She hadn't asked for this. She hadn't chosen to be a weapon or a tool. She was a victim of a system that saw her and her people as nothing more than objects to be controlled. I don't care about any of that, Eli said firmly, looking her in the eye. I'm with you, no matter what happens. I'm not going to let them hurt you. Lyra's eyes softened, but there was still a sadness in them. I don't want you to get hurt because of me, she whispered. I've seen what happens to those who help my people. The consequences are always deadly. Eli took a deep breath, his resolve growing stronger. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen. We're in this together. I'll fight for you, and we'll find a way to stop them. Whatever it takes. Lyra looked at him, her eyes searching his face, as if weighing the sincerity in his words. After a moment, she gave him a small nod. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible. Eli reached out, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. You don't have to thank me. This is our fight now, as Lyra leaned back against the table. She seemed lost in thought. Eli sat there with her, the weight of everything she had just shared sinking in. Her people had been enslaved for so long, forced to run and hide, never knowing peace. He could feel her pain, her fear, and the burden of the history she carried with her. But Eli also knew that they had a chance to change things, together. They could stand up to those who sought to control her and her kind. He wouldn't let her go through this alone, not when he knew what was at stake. The galaxy had made a terrible mistake in thinking it could use her people as tools. But Eli was determined to make sure that mistake ended with them. Let's take this one step at a time, Eli said, his voice steady. We'll figure this out, together. And as he looked at Lyra, he knew one thing for certain. Whatever the future held, he would stand by her side. They had already fought through so much, and now they would fight for the freedom and safety of her people. There was no turning back. The station was eerily quiet now. After the battle, after the chaos, everything felt like it had settled into a tense stillness. Eli stood in front of the observation window, staring out at the stars. The vastness of space was comforting, yet the weight of what was to come pressed heavily on his shoulders. Lyra stood beside him, her gaze distant, as if she, too, was lost in thought. Eli could feel the weight of her words from earlier still hanging in the air. They had come so far, faced so many dangers, and now there was something even bigger looming ahead. The enemy was not done with them. They knew where Lyra was, and they would come again. Stronger and more prepared. Eli and Lyra both knew this. The question now was what they would do about it. You've been quiet, Eli said, his voice low as he turned to look at her. Lyra didn't immediately respond. She had been quiet ever since they had spoken about her past, about her people's history. The weight of everything seemed to be catching up to her, and Eli could see it, the guilt, the fear, the anger. It all mixed in her eyes, even though she tried to hide it. I'm thinking, Lyra finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. There's no way to hide from them, no way to run forever. Eli stepped closer to her, his hand instinctively reaching out to touch her arm. We don't have to run. We've fought back before. We can do it again. Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with both determination and doubt. I'm not sure I can keep putting you in danger. Eli, you've already done more than I could have ever asked for. But it's not just me they want. It's my people. And I can't ask you to risk everything for something that may never be possible. Her words hit him like a punch. Ellie's heart ached as he looked at her. He had known that this fight wasn't just about them. But hearing her say it so plainly made him realize just how big it had become. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about freedom for her people, for those who had been oppressed and hunted for centuries. I'm not backing down, Eli said firmly, his voice steady. I'm not going to leave you. We've come this far, and I believe we can win. But we have to fight for more than just today. We have to fight for your people's future. Lyra looked at him, searching his face, trying to understand what he meant. Her eyes softened, and for the first time in days, she smiled. It was a small, hesitant smile, but it was there. It was enough to make Ellie's chest tighten with something between hope and fear. Eli, she began, but her words faltered. She looked away, as if trying to find the right words, but nothing seemed to come. I don't know what to do anymore. I never thought I'd make it this far. I thought I'd die running, just like so many others. But you changed that, Eli. Step closer, gently turning her to face him. You didn't do this alone. You've been fighting for a long time, Lyra, and now you're not alone anymore. I'm with you, every step of the way. There was silence between them for a moment, a quiet understanding passing through the connection they had built. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about a shared hope, a hope that they could change things, that they could take control of their destiny and not let the past dictate their future. Lyra's eyes filled with gratitude, but also something else. I'm scared, Eli, she admitted quietly. I'm afraid of losing everyone I care about. I don't want to lose you. Eli took a deep breath, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. You won't lose me. We'll get through this together, and we'll protect your people. I promise. He meant it with all his heart. He had come to realize that this wasn't just a fight for Lyra, it was a fight for what was right. The enemy that hunted her people was not just an external force. It was a system that needed to be destroyed. It wasn't just about saving Lyra, it was about ending the cycle of fear and oppression that had lasted for so long. But he also knew that this fight would come with a cost. There would be sacrifices. He could feel it in the pit of his stomach, the weight of the decision that they had to make. Lyra's enemies were not going to stop, and neither would he. They were fighting for a future, and sometimes the road to that future wasn't easy. "There's one more thing we need to do," Eli said, breaking the silence. "We need to make sure your people know that they're not alone. We have to take the fight to them." Lyra met his eyes, and for a moment, she hesitated. "Are you sure? If we do this, there's no going back. We'll have to fight until the very end." Eli nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm sure. We're already in this, together. We can make it right." Lyra's hand reached up to rest on his, her grip gentle but strong. "Then let's do it. Let's finish this." Eli smiled, feeling a surge of determination in his chest. They weren't alone anymore. They had each other, and together, they would face whatever came next. They had already proven they could survive the worst. Now, they would fight for a future where no one had to fear being hunted down. As they stood there, side by side, looking out at the stars, Eli felt a renewed sense of purpose. The enemy may have thought they had the power, but they were wrong. It was time to take back what was theirs. It was time for Lyra's people to be free. The fight wasn't over, but with each other. Eli and Lyra knew they had the strength to see it through. Together, they would win.